So SPY whales nailed another move. You can see this happened on Friday. There was a lot of activity to put orders for the 5:30 expiration. And later on, these ended up going 100% in the day. And you can see that happened around midday after that drop that we saw here on the S&P 500. If you remember this one over here, this sharp drop, news driven. And then they started to buy calls, as you can see from this post that they posted here on Cheddar Flow soon after, as they flipped to bullish and they're now targeting the 590 strike. Well, funny enough, it went all the way to 590 later in the session. So they pulled a clinic on Friday's trading session, yet another week where we saw not necessarily insider trades, but a very successful trade nonetheless, both 100% profit in either direction. Possible that they did know the news beforehand. In this case, of course, we'll never know, but they've been incredibly consistent overall. So another impressive trade by them. As for this week, though, we did have a lot of consolidation throughout all of last week between Tuesday and Friday, and really price didn't go anywhere crazy other than this drop here that soon got picked up and closed the daily above. So as for this week, I'm looking for something like a downtrend break. We can see over here, if I draw out the downtrend, it's rejected every single time since the pivot of where it started. You can see a rejection here, another rejection here, and that final rejection based on the closing price on Friday. So if we see a push higher or maybe even a gap up above this to start off the week, that would promote a lot higher price discovery. That's my personal assessment here. I believe this will break and we will have continuation higher because of a variety of reasons. One being that this gap has been defended. This is a breakaway gap. There's a lot of strength and momentum that can start from this. Also, we did retest inside of that gap over here. It never filled, but it retested it. And you can see bulls were adamant in making sure that this gap did not fill. So that's a good sign of strength as well. And then it was able to get picked up immediately after this dip. So dip buyers were certainly present among this dip. And we can see continuation from that just because they're very antsy to get their hands on buying anytime that there is even the slightest of dips. So great sign there. It still needs to get above this downtrend to have continuation. If we see that, something like 600 is not out of the picture by any means. I still have that 602.70 target that I mentioned before. And if you remember from previous videos on SPX, this is the same thing that we've been following. Remember, I was looking for either a bounce from my 5,856 pivot, or if it fell through, the bounce would come through at 5,778. Look at this. It bounced from 5,778. We never closed below that. Not even a single 15-minute close below that level. And it's been up ever since. Plus this additional higher low above 5,856 right from that level. So amazing job so far by bulls. They defended it perfectly, hence why I am bullish in the near term. And this is something that can continue going into June. So my plan is just to stay long and strong on the indexes such as the S&P 500 because this can have a nice continuation to my final target of 6,102. And then after that, it's up to the market to decide if it wants to continue to melt up into all-time high or consolidate. So that's the plan for the S&P 500 this week. As for some other tickers of interest, one that caught my eye last week was Tesla, specifically this 347.83 level. If it can hold this level, then I would consider it to be bullish. It did close under, however, on both the daily and the weekly last week. So I want to see something like a very quick and abrupt upside move early on Monday, or something like a gap up come Monday above this level, because if it can hold, that would make sure that all of this is just a retest and bounce of the breakout. This 347.83 level is the breakout level that was required in order for this kind of bounce to begin. You can see we actually opened right on the level, which shows its significance in this case, and it never closed below. So it had continuation, and now it looks like it's just a retest of that breakout level, no different than a downtrend retest after a downtrend breakout and then continuation after. It's the same thing here for this now support level. So I'd like to see a bounce from here. And we could look at something kind of like this, or at least see something like this, where we see a retest of that level, kind of like we have right here, and then just continuation much higher, like into 370s, 380s, as crazy as that may sound, if this holds. If this does not hold, it will likely flush back lower and we'll see it fall a lot more. So 347.83 is the level it must hold. If it does that, would like to be long this week on a Tesla. And of course, we can see here based on Friday, there actually was a decent amount of flow for this name. And as I scroll down over here, some of the largest orders like this, 1.6 million, actually were a decent amount out the money. The 400 strike on this one, there is some extra time on it, of course, but this is still an aggressive order because of the premium behind it, 1.6 million, plus how far out the money it is with that 400 strike. And also, if you look at open interest from previous weeks, if you remember some of that flow, a lot of these are still being held. Those July calls that we saw millions upon millions, maybe even 10 millions worth in terms of premium, those are still being held, evident based on the open interest, along with some new ads like this 400 strike one, like this 350 strike one for 1.3 million on Friday. So a lot of bullish activity still on Tesla despite this drop down over here, which is why I'm kind of leaning towards that retest of the breakout level and then continuation higher. So we'll see come Monday. I'm not touching it under 347.83. I will definitely touch it above 347.83 because this is something that can skyrocket in as soon as like this week. It can happen very quick. And when it begins to happen, it's going to be impossible to catch that trade setup. So right now, providing very nice risk reward, looking at something like entry above 347.83 and then maybe use a stop around like 344 below where this low from Friday came. So that's something else I'm interested in. I'm really excited about this potential trade setup just because this has been on a tear this entire year. Like if I go to the daily chart over here, you can see extreme accumulation for multiple months back here. It was actually the first of the Mag 7 to begin to fall down. I have to get rid of that. Accidentally drew that line, but it was the first of the Mag 7 to flush. Remember back in early March, we had this negative 15% day followed by consolidation, which acted as accumulation. Then we finally had the breakout over here. So it's continuing much higher. And my expectation, we could see something like 384 at the end of this nice leg that we're in right now. So definitely I'm bullish on this one, just needs to hold that 347.83 level. And then the last thing I wanted to mention today, there was a decent amount, again, if you noticed that from the previous week, of MSTR flow, very, very bullish flow. Of course, this is following Bitcoin because of how much Saylor has bought of Bitcoin recently as well within the past couple years. You can see here $2.8 million in premium, $2.2 million in premium. These are highly unusual, hence why they are highlighted here in blue on Cheddar Flow. And they're pretty short dated in terms of expiration. Like they expire this week on Friday and a decent amount out the money. So they are bullish on Bitcoin along with all of these other orders for short dated expirations. We're looking at a lot of premium overall, plus they're aggressive based on that strike and expiration. So these guys are looking for a very quick move. And if you remember from last week, they nailed that move on Bitcoin and it had that nice rally over the weekend. So if we go to Bitcoin over here, you can see it's sitting at 104,000 right now. They'd like to see some type of aggressive upside move a lot higher from here. So it could be a potential buy the dip opportunity from here, kind of like it's trying to carve out right now with this current low around 103,000 at the moment. So this is something that I'm watching because MSTR over here has been very strong this year with Bitcoin strength. They'd like to see a lot more continuation. So this entire area, this will be the last thing I mentioned, but this entire area over here will act supportive because this is a previous supply zone, now demand zone, pretty wide, but still you can see that it did find support based on Friday as well as Wednesday of last week. And as long as something like this can hold, maybe it wants to extend, for example, if I use the arrow or the brush rather over here, maybe it wants to extend to like test this high, which will act as support, and also over here at the lower end of the range, this red range that I showed you here. But I believe some type of a higher low will get carved out around here, and then we see that continuation higher, kind of similar to the Tesla setup that I showed you earlier. It's a retest of a previous breakout zone. We had to get above here because this is where the previous highs were. It was a supply zone, like I said, and once we got above it, now it is retesting it after breaking out. Of course, if it can hold that retest, then you see a nice continuation move from there. And it's actually great to see retests like this in the market because if they hold market wide, that would be bullish for the indexes and would, of course, support my eventual price target of 6,102 on the S&P 500. So that's my plan for this week. Going to be mainly watching S&P 500, Tesla, and MSTR. That's the plan, at least for now. I'm sure there'll be many other opportunities. Regardless, as always, appreciate you guys watching this video. I'll see you next time.